detail as you want.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jamie Ryu. I am a freelance editor and the editor for Contrarian Publishing, which is an assisted self-publishing company as well as an author subsidized publishing company. And I'll get into what that means in a little bit. So, my journey in publishing started when I was quite young, actually. When I was a freshman in college, I got my first internship at a literary agency, and then I continued to, get internships, and then I interned at a Big Five, Macmillan, which has my heart and soul. And then I was very lucky to continue working at Macmillan for quite a while. I think I worked there for over a year. And then I transitioned into a full-time job at HarperCollins, which was lovely and such an incredible experience and just absolutely the dream in terms of, it was what I'd been working towards for years and years. But to be quite frank, I got really tired of corporate life, and I wanted to find a way to help authors more directly because there were certain things that I felt like I wasn't able to do as part of traditional publishing, just for myself. And so I left traditional publishing and I entered the world of freelance and I started my company, Contrarian Publishing. So, Contrarian Publishing offers um, author services, freelance author services, and we also offer author subsidized publishing. So that's an option really for authors who want to self-publish primarily, but don't want to do all of the DIY work, or they don't want to find different places to source every single freelancer they would have to work with. So we're kind of a one-stop shop for all of those things. And the authors that publish through us get additional benefits. And in exchange for that, we eventually make a small royalty based on the book.
All right. That sounds amazing. I can totally feel you there about getting tired of corporate life and just branching out on your own. Been there, done
Yeah.
that too. So, one of our questions is this person has a book that is a sweeping, dark, epic fantasy series. It's going to be around 175K words, and they recently heard that a book should only be 80K words if it's your first book. Do they have a chance of getting traditionally published? And is this true?
Okay, so 80K is low. That is not true. That said, 175K words is going to be above kind of what traditional publishing is comfortable with. So I would say the hard cutoff for adult epic fantasies is going to be about 120,000 words. At that, anything over that, an agent is really going to look at that word count and they're going to go, that's not gonna be feasible. You'll see debut authors come out with books that are longer than this. Typically speaking, what has happened there is the book has gotten longer through the editing process with the publishing house. So when the book was picked up by an agent, it was likely not as long. There is also the rare unicorn where, you know, it's crazy long and it's not an automatic reject, but most of the time that word count is going to be pretty limiting for you. So I would really recommend cutting it down. See if you could get it to 120K words.
And speaking of agents, you said that Contrarian is a hybrid publishing house. So do
Yes.
you guys take agented authors, or is this like another alternative?
So we would take agented authors. That said, we're not a traditional publishing company. We do not pretend to be a traditional publishing company. So people will say, and most of the time this is true, that any publishing option where you need to pay any amount of money is a scam. That is oftentimes the case. If you are looking into any kind of option where you need to pay any amount of money to self publish, please, please, please do your research. Look at your contracts very, very thoroughly. Make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. I actually offer a service where I will straight up just look at contracts for free. So you can feel free to like DM me, and I can look over a contract and let you know if there are concerns. But generally speaking, the problem with pay to publish type services most of the time is that they take your rights. They do not give you much in return. You pay them thousands of dollars. They take all your royalties. They don't put in any effort into marketing. They don't put any effort into publicity. And they don't actually really do any of the work to help you make your book better. So, really, for most companies like this, they're called vanity presses. What happens is you give them a book, you give them a bunch of money, and then they get someone to throw kind of like a mediocre cover on it. They do a haphazard at best proofreading job, and then they throw it up on Amazon. That's what you'll get with most pay to publish services. It's very scary. I will be very honest with you. Any publishing company that claims to be traditional publishing but takes money, any company that is not forthcoming about what they're offering you and isn't transparent about what they're offering you, do not pursue any kind of a relationship with those companies. And so, because we're not a traditional publishing company, we haven't worked with agented authors yet, because the way agents typically work is agents don't take any payment. Agents get a commission of roughly 15% based on what you as the author bring in. So for most agents, it won't make sense to enter into any kind of a contract with a hybrid press, because then it's delaying when they actually get the money. They're not getting money until much later, and there's an initial investment from the author. It's just, they're kind of two separate worlds. We fall much more under the umbrella of indie publishing.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I just want to be 100% clear. We're not a traditional publishing company. We don't claim to be. Do not pay anyone that claims to be in traditional publishing. Don't pay agents. Don't pay publishers that claim to be traditional publishers. If someone's requiring any kind of payment in any fashion, they should be really clear about that. They should be really upfront. They should be really clear about exactly what you're getting for your money.
Right. That makes sense. I noticed that on writing communities like on Reddit, you'll have a lot of authors basically saying, "I'm breaking up with my agent. Is this behavior weird?" And 9 times out of 10, it's exactly what you described. It's these really enthusiastic people getting ready to like publish their works, and then people are asking them for all this money, and then they take it, and then they'll say, "Oh, the book is going to come out in May," and then it's April, and they haven't heard anything from them. They get like a book cover that they don't get input on, and they don't know what's going on, and then they have to walk back what they basically established.
Horrific. And oftentimes these kinds of companies, they make it impossible to get out of your contract. So not all legitimate hybrid presses do this. Personally speaking, with Contrarian Publishing, we allow authors to cancel their contracts at any time. So it's an at-will agreement. So we can cancel at any time. So if, like, God forbid, we enter into a contract and it turns out that the author is racist or something like that, that's not something that aligns with our company values. So we would have to part ways in that situation. That's not something that we as a company are okay with. And similarly, if we're not delivering on our side of the bargain, if the author feels like, hey, I'm really not seeing communication from you, I'm not satisfied with the work that's happening, the author is free to back out at any time. And that's one of the things I think that makes us different. Not all hybrid presses will do this. We're able to do this because we also have freelance contracts where we just work with authors to self-publish their own books, not through us. So that's why we offer that as an option.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's really clear that Contrarian really values not only like getting authors published through them, but just helping authors reach their potential in general, whether that's with Contrarian or not. And I really love that.
I really appreciate that. I'm trying really hard.
I could tell. I get it. Like, starting a business, it's really hard, and then especially if it's like a value-based company. Like,
yeah, for sure. I am trying so hard not to scam people, and I'm so concerned that I am scamming people. Like, I stay up at night and I'm like, am I scamming these people? Like, I question myself, and my friends and everyone are like, no, you're providing the exact services you said you were going to provide. And so I'm like, okay. okay, like, and I just need like constant reassurance that I'm actually not doing anything wrong, because I don't want to do anything wrong by anybody.
Right.
I'm really trying to run as ethical a company as I can, and also just do the work that I love.
Right. And I noticed on the website you guys do have authors like published through you, right?
Yes, yes, we do. So we actually have an author already who has published previous books, and she's coming out with her third book in September. So we're very, very excited for that. Her name is MB Thurman. And then we have an author named Kate Gray Glass who is publishing a book in March. And I'm not sure when this interview will be going live to everybody, but actually we just booked a local author event for her book launch, so we're very excited for that. Um, and we are publishing another one in May as well.
Oh,
So we're
wow.
yeah, so we're going full steam ahead. We're very excited.
No, that's amazing. And you guys haven't been open for very long?
No, I started the company last year because I quit my job last February. And I'm happy to discuss more actually why I did that. Um, I had been on a mental health leave because I was dealing with a lot, and I actually ended up kind of having a health crisis where I lost like 15 pounds in a month.
Oh my God.
And I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, my hair was falling out, and I was like, I need a mental health leave. Like, this is not normal. Because I think I was getting very, very burnt out. I was very stressed at work, and there was just um, kind of like an unfeasible amount happening in general. And so I went on mental health leave, and then I came back, and then my bosses go, "Hey, you're going to be assisting a third person. There's no increase in pay.
Ooh.
Um, we're not going to be decreasing your responsibilities." And I was like, I just came back from a mental health leave. I don't understand like where you're coming from. And my bosses were fairly sympathetic, but there was just nothing they could do from the point of view of the company just wouldn't hire more people. And that's something that is unfortunately increasingly common at traditional publishing companies nowadays. Is more and more work is spread across fewer and fewer people. And that was one of the things that I saw happening across the board over the years that I worked there. And it was so disheartening because every single person in publishing is passionate about the work. That's why they're there. Um, but there comes a point where the amount of work there is to do is just completely untenable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely get that. And it shows in the way that you are building the values and the principles of contrarian. So I'm sure like your employees also benefit from your experience, like you having experiencing that. And
Yeah,
then so do
we're
the
trying
authors.
so hard to make sure like to pay people for the work that they're doing as much as we can. We have like a very, very limited startup cost and everything. So because we're just getting off the ground. So I'm very thankful to the people that I work with that they're willing to kind of work with me and figure out what's fair to them and what they're willing to accept, versus what we can ultimately do. And we try to come to an agreement there. And I am looking forward to the day where I can give back more to the people that I work with, because that's the goal.
I love that. That is amazing. Your experience actually leads me into another question, which is what does it take to get into the publishing industry?
Oh,
I know
okay.
that's like a behemoth of a question.
So let me start with my journey, which is honestly, I started when I was in middle school. I decided in middle school that I wanted to be an editor. And so I geared all of my high school extracurriculars, my college extracurriculars into making my resume look as incredibly enticing as possible so that someone would take a chance on me. And luckily, someone did take a chance on me when I was a freshman in college, and I got an internship very early. I was also very fortunate to go to college in New York, which is where a lot of publishing is based. I'm going to be very, very transparent. And this is not to dissuade anyone from pursuing publishing. I just want to be
You're just
very
being
clear.
realistic.
Yeah, I'm being realistic, and I'm happy to also talk about the positives as well. So I'll do that. I tend to be more of a pessimist, so I can tend to focus on the negatives. But let me do the pros and cons here. It was incredible getting to work with all of these different people. I interned for Distel Godric and Barrett, which reps some huge people. I believe at the time, at least, they repped Colleen Hoover. I don't know if they still do. They repped like Rochelle Mead. They repped Barack Obama at one point. I remember having to mail checks to Barack Obama, and that was crazy as a 19-year-old to have to do. And that was an incredible experience, and I learned so much. So a lot of the work that you do as an intern at a literary agency is reading through submissions as well as aiding in mailings and brainstorming ideas and things like that. But reading submissions and then writing reports on the submissions is the biggest part of what you do. So you get a very, very early feel for whether or not you kind of have the right editorial eye. You'll get that feedback early on. About kind of where your editorial instincts are. And then from there, I was able to build on that internship and gain another internship and another internship. Honestly, experience matters more than education in publishing. Most of publishing does require a bachelor's degree. If the job doesn't outright state that, I'm going to be very transparent. It probably silently requires that. Just in the sense that for internships at Big Fives, for example, there are like 3,000 applicants for those positions. That's a lot of people. So if you are going up against, if you having no experience in theory are going up against like someone with 3 internships under their belt,
Right.
That's kind of the trade-off that happens. And so I would say across the board, people will say internships are unfortunately very, very important. Experience in general is very, very important. If you can get experience at a library or at a bookstore, even that is going to be more helpful in a lot of ways than something like a master's in publishing might be. Because a master's in publishing is good for gaining a scope of what the industry kind of is and what to expect, but it will not be necessarily the thing that opens doors for you in terms of getting a full-time job. Most editorial assistants have like 3 to 4 internships under their belts before they get hired.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And many of them are unpaid.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the other thing, is it's a very privileged based thing, right? Is are you able to spend all this time, not make any money, intern at this place, live in a very, very expensive city? Like these are a lot of barriers to entry that are put up just by virtue of where the industry is.
Right.
Yeah. So that said, working in traditional publishing means that you are at the forefront of what publishing is doing, and it means that you get to have actually quite a lot of say in what gets published. There will be books that you love that your bosses pass on, and they will explain why they're passing on it. There will be books that you love that make it to acquisitions and then they die for one reason or another. And there's books that you lose out on. But in a lot of ways, it feels so good to be a part of the process and being a person that is saying yes to these people, and giving the opportunities to the people who really deserve them.
Yeah, that was an amazing answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
It sounds a little bit like publishing in like the fashion industry. I haven't done it, but I have come across people who were working at like the top fashion editorial companies, and it just sounds cutthroat. It almost gives like a devil wears Prada kind of moment. Like it seems to be all the same.
I will say I did have fully a Devil Wears Prada type of situation at some point while I was working in publishing. I will not disclose where it was. I will not disclose who it was. I will not disclose even if I worked directly for the person or not. But I had experiences like that where there was someone who would ask interns to bring their bag to their apartment for them.
Oh.
Yeah, so they would like give interns subway fare and be like, bring my bag and coat to my apartment on the Upper East Side.
That sounds very New York. Like,
Yeah.
that sounds very, very New York.
Yeah.
Our next question is, what is the balance between writing what you would like versus being unique enough for what the agency desires?
Yeah. So that's actually a very, very difficult balance to strike. So if you are having problems with that, it is not just you. It's very difficult because when you look at kind of what agents are looking for, what agents are actually looking for is what publishers are looking for. What publishers are actually looking for is what bookstores are looking for. So it's kind of this trickle down thing where bookstores and retailers in general will say, oh, we're seeing a lot of this selling, or we're not seeing a lot of this selling. So we don't want any more of these titles. But publishing works very slowly. So they work kind of like 3 years out. So you won't really see the effects of a bookstore selling, this isn't selling well, until like 2 years later. So it's a very interesting kind of trickle down economy almost, which we all know that trickle down economics doesn't work. So that is kind of a system that it's so slow that it can be so difficult to figure out what does an agent want versus what's going to work. And so I would say that most of the industry plus myself recommends don't chase trends. Don't try to write towards what an agent is looking for right now. Because if an agent is looking for something right now, by the time you finish writing a book, that agent might no longer be looking for that thing because they might have heard from an editor that actually we're no longer acquiring this thing, so we don't want it. And querying takes such a long time. It takes even longer now than it did pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, it was already taking a long time, and things have slowed way down post-pandemic, and even still. So, which is crazy because it's been like 3-4 years, and we're still seeing the effects of that. So, never write towards a trend. If an agent says, hey, I want something, and you happen to already have a manuscript that fits, then go for it. Then say, I have exactly what you're looking for. I think it's going to be great. But don't write something just because an agent says they want it. Make sure you're staying true to the stories that you want to tell and the stories that speak to you and resonate with you, because that's ultimately what's going to entice readers more.
Okay, so our next question is, how does having an online presence or lack thereof impact self publishing and traditional publishing?
Cool. Okay. Self-publishing. It definitely impacts self-publishing a lot more than it impacts traditional publishing. So let me talk about traditional publishing first. In traditional publishing, if you are a fiction author, you do not need to have a big online presence. If an agent says that, honestly, they're probably not the most legit agent. There are many, many books across many genres and many age groups where debut authors come out and they do not have any kind of a social media presence. They might not even have social media, period. And that is okay. Is it beneficial to have it? Yes. Is it even advisable to have it so that readers know where to find you and know how to connect with you? Yes. But if that's really something that you don't have the bandwidth for, or if that's something you're not comfortable with, in most cases in fiction, you are going to be okay. And if someone tells you otherwise, either that's going to be in a couple of years and things have really, really changed for some reason, in which case, who knows how much of this interview in general is going to be applicable in like 5 years time, or the agent just isn't being legit, or they're trying to rely more on their authors to sell themselves than they are comfortable selling in their own skill. That was kind of a messed up sentence, but I think that made sense. And then in terms of nonfiction, for nonfiction authors, unfortunately, platform matters much more. So that goes for memoirs, that goes for just general nonfiction titles. If it is a more general nonfiction title where you're trying to write a business book or you're trying to write like a self-help book or something like that, publishers are going to want to see that you have some kind of a following and that there is going to be a reason for people to trust you, essentially. So if you don't have a platform and you're trying to write a nonfiction book, first I would recommend in some fashion that you do start trying to build a platform. But if you have some kind of credential, like if you have a degree or something like that, that is going to also open some doors for you and kind of knock down the barriers there are surrounding online presence. Memoirs, unfortunately, are also similarly, they want to see that you have an audience. It is very difficult to build an audience for a memoir. So that's something that is almost kind of like a completely unreasonable ask. In terms of self-publishing, you almost definitely want a social media presence. If you don't have one now, that is okay. You can build a social media presence when you're self-publishing. You don't need one, but you're going to need a way to promote the book. And unfortunately, all the paid ways that exist to promote the book are very, very expensive.
Right.
Um,
Of course.
and so, like, for example, that's something Contrarian Publishing does offer promotional services. That's something that we do for the books that we're publishing, where we try very hard to promote. We aim for publicity and things like that. But all of that costs money. So that's something that the author is investing in us to do. And that's something that we also invest in with our own money to try to make sure that our books are succeeding. But if you don't have the capital to do that, then it becomes very, very difficult. It becomes a situation of, is it worth it to send PR boxes? For you, probably not, because PR boxes, you need to pay for the book, you need to pay for the items that go in the box, you need to pay for mailing, and if it's a PR box and there's things out besides a book in the box, you don't qualify for media mail. So it becomes very, very expensive. So the cheapest, most grassroots way to promote your book when you are a self-publishing author is going to be to utilize social media. And so it is advisable that you begin building some kind of a following.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think like if you look on big social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, you'll see a lot of young like new authors self-promoting their books as
Absolutely.
aggressively as possible, but
Absolutely,
they want
because
you to know their story.
unfortunately promotions, and I mean like pretty relentless, incessant promotions are going to get you sales, and you're going to feel ridiculous because you're going to be like, am I just shouting into the void? Am I annoying people? But that's what you need to do to get the sale, and that's what you need to do to make a living and to get income. And that is something that most indie readers are very aware of. And it's so you're not going to necessarily bother them by trying to promote your book because that's your job. Unfortunately, when you're a self-publishing author, being an author is not your primary job, which is, again, one of the reasons that I opened Contrarian Publishing, because I did want authors who are self-publishing, if they want and if they have the capital for it, to be able to just be an author if they would like to be. But for most authors, especially for most self-publishing authors, it is just not the case that you can just sit there and be an author and not do the promotional work. You'll see even in traditional publishing, more and more authors are having to promote their own titles and do their own things. When you see things like pre-order perks from traditional publishing, if they're a debut or if they're kind of a smaller author, there's a decent chance that they paid for at least part of that themselves.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Our next question is about agents, actually.
Yeah. Go for
So
it.
this one says agents often include nebulously defined jargon in their manuscript request lists, such as plotty or twisty. Do you believe that these are demonstrably distinct and new quantities that are indicative of contemporary market viability, or a reformulation of classic storytelling facets or something else?
I think it's usually indicative of kind of what an agent is wanting in their, like, on their list and kind of the reading taste that they have at the time. So there are stories that are, just to use the exact examples that you gave, there are stories that are very, very character driven. You might not necessarily see those on the shelves or they might not be marketed to you, but there are stories where there is almost no plot and you are just kind of there with the author and you're along for the ride. You'll see, generally, again, I'm going to be using like really big name authors just because that's going to be the most like accessible to everybody. You'll see a lot of John Green books do this. John Green is like kind of allergic to plot, or you'll see like a semblance of a plot kind of in there somewhere, but then actually it doesn't really have a plot. And so if an agent says that they want something plotty, they probably mean they want something that, yes, it is character driven in the sense that all books should be character driven, but they want the plot to be kind of the main thing that you're flipping the page for, and you're not necessarily trying to figure out like, oh, is my character going to overcome a trauma, but more, oh, is my character going to make it out of this dangerous situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then in terms of kind of the same goes for the idea of being twisty. There are a lot of stories that are very straightforward. And so again, that's something where you might not necessarily read those books or you might not necessarily see them. But in general, there are a lot of stories that are very, very straightforward, that are very just one step after another. You can tell kind of where it's going. And a lot of readers love those books. You know, you don't necessarily need a big plot twist or several big plot twists. But if an agent is saying they want something twisty, they want kind of to expect the unexpected and not know where things are going exactly. It feels like it could go multiple ways, that kind of a thing. And so I don't think it's necessarily indicative of larger industry trends and more indicative of an agent feeling like probably what happened is an agent read a story recently and they loved these elements from a story that they read, probably a published work that they read. And so they're like, I want to find the next this. And so that is most likely what is happening when agents say that they want those elements.
Yeah, it sounds like a matter of really looking at what genre too, like the agent really focuses on.
For sure.
And if they have like an agent bio, like what do they say their most favorite book is? Like what do they say they really enjoy
Absolutely.
reading?
Because there's a big difference between like a twisty mystery, which is supposed to, that's just by definition of the genre, kind of the way that it's supposed to be, and like a twisty romance or something like that, or like a twisty fantasy even.
Yeah,
Those are
that
going
makes
to be
sense.
very, very different.
Our next question is, when do I start fishing for publishers?
Okay, so I'm realizing this is something I haven't talked about, and I don't know how well versed in kind of the publishing process your audience will be, but I'm going to kind of talk about start to finish a little bit, the process from finishing a book to kind of getting a publisher. Very long process, so it's going to be truncated. But so you don't want to start looking for a publisher or an agent until the book is 100% done if you are pursuing traditional publishing. So kind of the process of finding a publisher in traditional publishing goes like this. You as the author write a book. You have finished a draft. You are going to want to polish that draft as much as possible. Like, honestly, revise it until you personally feel like it is ready to publish. Most likely, it's still not ready to publish. Revise it until you feel in your heart like it might be ready to publish. And that's something where you might do some like manuscript exchanges with some other writers. You might find a beta reader or two. I don't necessarily recommend hiring somebody or paying money to have someone read it. I don't typically recommend that authors who are pursuing traditional publishing spend any money anywhere early on in the game. It's just not necessary. You might be spending money that is not, like, you don't need to. Um, and that's a tangent that I can get into a little bit later. Um, so once you have a draft that you think is ready to go, you think, honestly, I could put it on Amazon tomorrow and I would be happy with the quality of the work. Once you're at that stage, you want to start querying agents. So you want to contact agents using a query letter that is a pretty standardized formula. You don't want to deviate from the formula too much, because ultimately, think of the query letter as a business proposal. You are asking an agent, "Hi, I'm an author. Would you like to enter into a business contract with me?" So that is kind of the mindset with which you want to query agents. You want to be using pretty formal language. Don't swear a bunch, even if the book has a lot of swearing. Don't be super casual. It's a business letter, so kind of treat it a little buttoned up, even though the industry itself is usually not super buttoned up. Um, at this point, prepare yourself for a lot of rejection. This is the point where authors say that they're in the query trenches and they have been querying forever and they're not hearing back, and it's very, very difficult, and it is so difficult and so emotionally draining. So just be prepared for that. So once you manage potentially to secure an agent, um, at that point, the agent will take your work on submission. So that means that they will, assuming that your agent is not very editorial. If your agent is editorial, then you will do some edits first with the agent. So once the book is ready to submit, the agent will submit the book to editors in rounds. And hopefully, if you have signed with a legitimate agent who knows what they're doing, or at least assigned with a larger company who has connections at houses, they have a list of editors who they are familiar with, or at least are tangentially familiar with, who they can email and be like, "Hey, I have this amazing book. I think it's going to be right for you." And then you wait a very, very, very long time. If you thought querying was bad, wait until you're on submission. It is worse. And at that point, it's kind of all in-house. I don't know how in depth you want me to go from there. I can go into it a bit, but
I think a lot of our members are still in like the querying stage, doing their first round of edits.
yeah. So I can touch on it very briefly then. So what would happen after that, just to sum it up, is if an editor really likes the book, then they'll take it to their team, they'll take it to acquisitions, and either it dies at acquisitions or the editor makes the agent an offer, and then you're published, or going to be published. That was all, unfortunately, a very truncated kind of look at how everything works. I say truncated, that was very long, but it's a very, very long process. Like, this is genuinely, many people query 100 agents and still don't sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Unfortunately, very
I'm
long.
trying not to be too like doom and gloom, because there are many, many people who do see success very immediately. There are people who query one agent and they immediately get a full request, and they're like, "Wow, like I can't believe it. I was expecting all this heartache and to be sitting here forever just waiting, and I heard back immediately." That is very out of the norm. Honestly, the most normal thing is going to be that you are waiting for months, and maybe you hear back and maybe you don't. Um, Genuinely, if you don't hear back pretty early on, probably within the first like 20 queries, at that point, I would think about asking a professional and seeing if there's something that can be fixed.
And in your opinion, when it comes to the agents, like say you have an agent who is known for discovering like a really big book, like
Mhm.
The Hunger Games, right?
Yeah.
And then you have agents who are probably like lesser known, maybe a little bit more green. Who do
Mhm.
you recommend going to? Like, does it make sense to go for like the bigger agent if you feel like your book really touches on what they're putting out now?
So I would say that it really depends on kind of you and the experience you're wanting, and also what you're open to. So I think a lot of authors kind of see pursuing an agent as a I need to take what I can get type of a scenario. And if that's how you want to look at the situation, then that is completely up to you. And I completely understand why authors feel that way, because it is so difficult to even get someone to respond to you. So I completely understand why authors feel that way. Ultimately, there are benefits and disadvantages to both. So looking at someone ginormous like the people at Writer's House, or the people at New Leaf Literary, or some of the really big public literary agencies, they have the name recognition. So when they show up in an editor's inbox and it says that Susie Townsend is sending you a query, you're like, oh, look, it's Susie Townsend. It's probably something pretty good. And they're going to look at it pretty immediately. That said, someone so large has a very large list of people. And that means that they're significantly more selective because, they only have so much time. And that also means that because they have such a large list, you may get less time with them. So if you have a lot of questions, if you are very unfamiliar with the process, if you're someone who likes to be very involved, you might not get that experience. You might not necessarily be able to have your hand in the pie the way that you want to, or be able to have as much say as you want to. You might have less of a more very formal business relationship than you might with, say, a newer agent. A newer agent doesn't necessarily have the kind of name recognition where they're going to come into an editor's inbox and immediately be known. But especially if they're attached to an agency that is already kind of a larger name, they do have some recognition, in the sense that I can be like, oh, look, it's someone at Metamorphosis or someone at Jabberwocky, and I could be like, oh, I know that that's a legitimate agency. I know that this person is probably newer, but I'm still going to take a look. Editors in general look at every single thing they get. Agents also look at every single thing they get. It's just that a lot of the times it's fairly immediately apparent whether or not they want something, and so that's why you might feel like maybe they didn't actually look. But just to kind of maybe reassure some of your writers here, you would not believe how many queries agencies get that are just full of just the worst punctuation, the worst grammar, barely coherent sentences, and those are an automatic reject, because I can't even get through the grammar problems to understand the story. And so genuinely, you would not believe how many of the books that agents get are like that. And so when you really think about it, a lot of the times that's what's happening when there's such fast rejects. It's either there's grammar problems or the story is just not what the agency is looking for. And so that's pretty immediately apparent. In terms of newer agents, though, they have more time to kind of dig into all of that. So with newer agents, you might not necessarily get that same feeling of, oh, this agent didn't have time for me. Oh, they didn't really look at my stuff. And they are going to have a lot more time to devote just to you and to your book, and to make sure that your book is successful. So it genuinely really is about kind of the experience that you want.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it really sounds like your query letter is kind of your first introduction of your writing. So it's really, really important that if you're trying to present yourself as somebody who is worth, having a business deal with, that you have your stuff together. So you have an
Yeah,
advantage if you just use grammar.
genuinely, I'm not even kidding. Yes. If you want to hire anyone at any point in the process, that's where I would recommend it, especially if you haven't contacted anybody yet or spent any money yet. That's where I would recommend you spend any sort of money. There are also free resources you can utilize to do this. You do not need to pay somebody to look at your query. There are online forums, and there are people who will help in general. You don't need to pay somebody, but if you would like, many editors, including myself, offer query evaluations. If you are querying and you are not hearing back, and you did not already hire somebody to look at your query, at that point, you may want to hire somebody to look at your query and see what isn't clicking. Is it the opening pages that isn't clicking? Is it the query that isn't clicking? Or is it just like a really dead genre? And so no one's getting back to you because the market just is not right for the book. So trends are cyclical, they come back. If you hear that the market just isn't right, unfortunately, you may need to shelve the project. You may need to come back to it in the future. But trends come and go. There will be a time where your dystopian novel will meet the market again. So if you are getting full requests from agents and they are rejecting your full, but you're kind of confused about the feedback, or you're not exactly sure why they're rejecting the full, or if they don't have very concrete feedback for you, that is when I would recommend thinking about talking to an editor. At no point before this do I recommend talking to and hiring an editor, just because it is not generally necessary. And it is very possible that you hire an editor and they give you this feedback and you work on the novel and you bring it up to what the editor was saying. There's still no guarantee that it's going to be picked up by an agent. And beyond that, what if the agent is like, hey, your book is great, but all of these things are bad, and we need to change them, and it's all the things that the editor had you change? That's very possible. So I would really do kind of like a cost benefit analysis for you personally of how worth it is it for me to get this feedback? What do I really need? I recommend in general, starting with, if you are hiring an editor, trying to find someone who does manuscript evaluations before you hire someone for a developmental edit or a line edit or anything like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the last one is, what is a good way to determine the title for your manuscript that fits best? And how important is title when you're writing these query letters?
When you're writing a query letter, titles are not super important. I'm going to be very real. I wouldn't go with untitled. Come up with a title of some sort. But if you feel like you can only come up with like a super generic title, like Alex Kim Saves the World or something, that's okay. Because oftentimes publishers will change the title. There are situations where there's another book that came out that's a very similar title, and so you need to change the title. There are situations where the title just doesn't work very well. There are situations where you can straight up say to the agent or to the editor or whoever, I'm not really married to this title. If you feel that there's another title that has better marketability, I'm very open to changing the title. Most of the time, it's not going to be a make or break. I just would recommend to make sure that you're kind of sticking within the genre. So don't make it sound like A Court of Thorns and Roses if it's a romance book, or make it sound like it's going to be some kind of like a knife in the shadows type of a thing when it's like a comedy, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just make sure the title is vaguely indicative of what the book is, and then go forth.
Okay. So that concludes all of our members' questions, but I'd like to give you any room that you might want to take to talk more about like contrarian and why authors should choose contrarian. Like, what about your team and your experience makes it a good choice?
Great. I'm gonna give kind of a weird answer. I don't think you need to choose contrarian. I think you should do whatever your heart desires. So I try very, very hard not to make authors feel pressured into working with us, because ultimately you should only work with us if you connect strongly with our message and you feel like we are going to do a good job. If you look at our social media and you like what we're doing. If you don't feel that way, if you don't like any, or like if you don't like kind of the vibe that we're giving off, you should not work with us, because ultimately you are investing in your book when you're working with us, because we're not a traditional publishing company. You are going to need to have upfront monetary investment, and we are working on models in the future where there's less upfront investment required from authors, and then we take a higher royalty percentage, but that's not something that we offer quite yet. And so that's something where kind of we're in the flux and we're growing. And so as we grow, kind of those options will become more available and become more open. And we might genuinely even be working towards pursuing more traditional contracts in the future where, there's no upfront investment. The big difference in terms of what should be happening if you are investing upfront in your book or not is, if you have upfront monetary investment, you should be keeping the lion's share of the royalties. If a company is both asking you for a ton of money and taking like 90% of your royalties, that's not okay. They are scamming you. In traditional publishing, publishers keep on average 90% of royalties. So authors usually only make like 10% on royalties, and then agents take 15% of that 10%. So in terms of the amount of royalties you're making, it's typically not very much. The big advantage to that is that you get a large advance up front. A lot of the time. Sometimes you get a small advance up front. Sometimes it's like $5,000. Sometimes it's even lower than that. And then you hear about those crazy offers where people get like 6-figure, 7-figure deals. And that's not standard, by the way. That's very, very atypical. And so that's kind of the difference, where we do kind of the inverse of that, where you are making the investment. So we're not taking most of the royalties. You keep most of the royalties, and we earn royalties at a much, much lower rate. We earn about 10% on royalties. And then if things change in the future, we might, change that up. But in general, you should only work with us if you have the upfront capital to invest in your book, if you feel like our team is right for you, if you feel good about the editorial feedback that we give you. We do offer kind of like sample edits up front, or you can hire us for a manuscript evaluation up front, just so you can get a feel on what it's like to work with us. And look at what our other titles are doing. Look at what we're doing for them and see if that is worth it to you. If it's not, then there is absolutely not an obligation to work with us. We feel very strongly that authors, especially when working with us, but when working with anyone, should get a say, a very, very large say in what happens, because it's your book, and we wouldn't be here without your book, and without your story.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Like, one of the things that we do is we give our authors final say over pretty much everything. So, and if we don't like it, then the contract's terminable. So then we don't have to keep working together. And that's not like a threat, but that's if we meet at a creative crossroads where it is just unsurmountable, then we get paid for the work that we did. You get refunded for any work that we didn't do if you already paid more than that. And then we've worked together, and we've still kind of exchanged services and monetary payment, and then we can go our separate ways. And it's not necessarily anything that's harmful or needs to be like a super upsetting or bad experience. It's just we don't actually align creatively, it turns out. So we're going to part ways, and it's not on bad terms. It's actually happening with one of our books right now. We actually had just announced a book that was coming out in July, and that author and our team met at a creative crossroads in terms of the cover. And it's something where we weren't willing to put out the book with the cover that it has, and she wasn't willing to bend on the cover that she wanted. And so we're parting ways, and it's not anything that is, there's like no bad blood. I'm going to still work with her as an editor separately, like alongside of this. She's just not publishing with us. She's publishing it herself, and that's okay.
Yeah, she just wants her cover. Like, it's not
Exactly. And that's something that we're very, very okay with. And A lot of the times there is a compromise to be found. In this specific situation, because of the details and the people that were involved, there wasn't unfortunately a compromise that was going to work. But most of the time there's a compromise to be had. Because ultimately this is assisted self-publishing, it more than anything, because you're paying for it up front. So this author now has the editorial work and, has some of the resources that we had already given her, and she can go on and publish it on her own now. And we're very excited for her.
No, yeah, I can hear like the enthusiasm. Like you obviously show a lot of care for like the authors that come to you and that want to work with you.
Yeah, we don't want anyone to be unhappy in working with us. So if an author is feeling like, hey, I'm really not okay with an edit that you suggested, I feel really strongly that this needs to be a part of the book, and I'm not comfortable changing it, that's okay. This is your book. And that's one of the big benefits of self-publishing or of working with a company like ours. Um, that's okay. In traditional publishing, that might not necessarily be okay. And honestly, if it's not okay, most of the time, an editor's not going to tell you. They're just not going to sign you up front. Like if they see something that's a deal breaker, they can't force you to change something once they've signed you. So that's kind of why part of why they're so selective is because if they have a big change that needs to be made and you're kind of not okay with that, then they're just going to back away
And
because
that's
they won't publish
another
it.
way to like see it too. It's not, oh, I'm just being rejected, my book must be bad. It's like maybe somebody doesn't want to force you to change the elements that work for you because they can see how it can work, but it's not going to work for like their company.
Exactly, and because the traditional publishing market, it's rigid in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of things that they won't necessarily take chances on for one reason or another, and you'll see that a lot in the indie space where there are certain things like new adult thriving in the indie space because it's filling a void that traditional publishing has left.
Yeah. So that concludes our official interview. We've got through all the questions. We've talked a lot about your experience and Contrarian. Thank you so much for like taking the time out of your day to like speak with
Absolutely,
me.
I'm so sorry that I spoke for so long.
Oh no, it's fine. It's absolutely fine.